Hello, and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I'm curious about AI. Today's question, can AI help us live forever? Dramatic music. Okay, that's the clickbaity version of this conversation, but that's not entirely accurate. The subject is far more nuanced, as is our esteemed guest. And that brings me to several months ago, I traveled to Panama City for an AI conference because apparently now I'm the kind of weirdo who goes to Panama for AI conferences. And this was specifically the Beneficial AGI Summits. It was largely an optimistic look at an AI-infused future. And there were many smart and captivating speakers. But I was most enthralled by a woman named Dr. Natasha Vita-More, who is one of the leaders of the transhumanism movement, and she has been for decades. She's a futurist, and she is studying all the ways that we can ethically leverage technology to extend and improve our lives. Her resume is vast and colorful and would take way too long to go through in full detail, but she's a philosopher, a filmmaker, a scientist, and artist. And just a few highlights. In 1982, she wrote the Transhumanist Manifesto. In 1997, she designed the first whole-body prosthetic, and she is now the executive director of Humanity Plus, a nonprofit devoted to using technology to improve the human condition. Now, there is some very juicy, sexy stuff in the world of transhumanism. Things like synthetic body parts, human brain interface, all that kind of what's often referred to as the cyborgy elements here. And we do get there. We do cover that. But before that, for the right framing, I think it's important to establish the philosophical context and backdrop of transhumanism. So we start there. And then in many ways, AI's impact on longevity can be a little more mundane and meat and potatoes, but still incredibly impactful than you might expect. So Natasha kind of details the way that AI likely will have enormous positive consequences on extending lifespan before we even get to the more sci-fi realms of helping augment body parts, things like that. And towards the end of our conversation, Natasha and I do get into some pretty wild concepts like nano-robots that repair our cells and the potential for solving things like dementia. Like that is on the table in this world. And I feel like, frankly, there is a lot more meat in the bones here, a lot more to discuss. So a sequel episode of some sort will likely be in the cards. I had a really fun time speaking to Natasha. This topic is one of the reasons I find AI so exciting. Yes, it's cool to be able to harness AI for productivity hacks. It's cool that it might help businesses like slash costs by 37%. And it obviously, we have episodes discussing that stuff because that's important too. But these are the kind of topics that really get me fired up. The thinking about how AI can potentially have really long-term, needle-moving impacts on humanity. So for now, please enjoy my conversation with a futurist, Dr. Natasha Vita-More. Natasha, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's start with some basic level setting. What is your definition of transhumanism? And briefly, what is it that you find so captivating and compelling about it?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. And I think primarily because people seem, or the public seems to be a little bit confused and maybe disoriented about what transhumanism is. And it gets all sorts of certain parallels and metaphors and analogies and misrepresentations. And I think that's really sad. And I think it speaks more about society and how we view ourselves as social beings than anything else. First and foremost, transhumanism is a
Hmm.
philosophy. And I think that maybe there could be an issue there because philosophy is not as highly regarded today as it was maybe in antiquity, where we had Socrates and Plato and the different women who were awarded knowledge in their respective fields in mathematics and science. But we usually think of Socrates, the Socratic method of questioning, which is really great, and we think of Aristotle and Plato, and it's usually those philosophers that are thought of as the past and having done their marvelous work, where today philosophy has lost a little bit of its stamina, let's
Hmm.
see, um, in replacement of entrepreneurs. You're an entrepreneur, not a philosopher, or you're a scientist, not a philosopher, or you're maybe a computer scientist and or you're an ethicist rather than a philosopher. But if we look at the true meaning of philosophy, it is about the study of human
Hmm.
existence, why we're here, and the world around us. Not that it's anthropocentric, that it's the relationship between our species, humanity, our Homo sapiens, and the world in which we engage. And taking that further, philosophy looks at what is this reality? What is the logic, the logos, the ethos, the pathos of existence? And I think that is the most important thing that we need to be facing
Hmm.
today when we're looking at what are we as humans? How are we evolving? How is technology affecting us, especially artificial intelligence, and especially increasing the lifespan of our species and probably other species as well. So I think philosophy is very important.
I love that context. I think it's helpful context. This is not just a technology conversation. This is fits into a broader exploration of philosophy. That said, but there are many different branches of philosophy. What sets transhumanism apart?
Well, transhumanism is a
Yes.
philosophy that focuses on the scientific and technological advances that are changing our lives and their potential effects to transform humanity's future for the better. It's not the dystopian view or the utopian view. There is no perfection in transhumanism, and there certainly can be certainly existential risks, but there's also existential
Mm.
opportunities. So transhumanism looks at where we are today, the effects of science and technology on our species and our, let's call it the ecosystem in which we exist, in the material, the physical world, and also other worlds yet to be explored. It approaches this and promotes this sensibility, which I think is a very important sensibility in respect to the great philosophers of antiquity, and in respect of the fact that transhumanism arrived at through the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, where they're questioning the status quo,
Mm.
questioning this normalcy of what we're supposed to be as humans, questioning the laws and the rules and the regulations on us, and the lack of diversity in understanding women as part, certainly, and that all people are part of this species. We all evolved out of Africa as the earliest
Mhm.
hominids. So, with that said, transhumanism understands that, and it looks at where the technology is headed and the ethical concerns, of course, the dangers, and also the enormous opportunities. So that is transhumanism. And it is linked to humanist philosophy. Humanism as a philosophy really cares about humanity and
Mhm.
the values of humanity, but doesn't look at the future of where we're headed. So transhumanism takes humanism, which is a highly regarded secular view, and takes it to a deep dive, a very enriched and scholarly informed um, analysis of these technologies that we're dealing with today, and the new ones coming about, and the sciences as well, so that we are better critical thinkers and better visionaries and can better sort out the world around us to understand it. And so I think that's transhumanism in a nutshell.
I love that you frame this, I think, appropriately, going back centuries and even millennia. And I think a layperson, they hear transhumanism and they think it's just about kind of this like, oh, Black Mirror esque like cyborg stuff. And there's certainly
Yeah.
technology is obviously at the forefront of this, but to your point, the roots in the philosophy go back millennia. I think it's important to bring up. Is it on a very just simple level, though? Let me know how right or wrong this maybe cartoonishly simple framing is. Is it fair to say that a large part of the spirit of transhumanism is using technology to help us live longer and improve our bodies and improve our lives, which often means altering or improving our physical bodies in some way? I know that's probably not fair to all the nuance, but what is that getting wrong, or is that largely correct?
I think it's largely correct, but I think it's largely correct in a very light tone, and I think that when you say cartoonish, yeah, it is in a way. Oh, we want to improve, but it's deeper
Sure.
than that. There's more than that. It's not just the body having stronger, faster, better bodies, and more youthful. Certainly, everyone wants to be healthy. It's not about being stronger, more vital, more youthful, better looking, all these things. It's about being healthier.
Hmm.
And along with being healthier come those things. It's better to have stronger muscles and stronger bones, and maybe pay attention to the sugar levels and the carbohydrates levels in your body, and make sure that your heart is pumping, and your blood is healthy. All these things are part of that health spectrum. So it's not just about better bodies; it's about healthy
Hmm.
lives. And within the body is also the brain. And transhumanism has been, since its inception, very focused on the cognitive
Hmm.
sciences, neuropsychology, and neuroscience, the neuroplasticity, um, um, also, and not only that, the psychology of what causes people to want to play victim or want to
Hmm.
achieve. So, what is it in people that gives them purpose in life? And how do we find that purpose in life? So, that well being and health is also in psychology. So, it's the brain and the body, the unit of being human, so that it's looking at living a daily life that is nourishing, and it's based on four very basic things, and most people know this but don't do it. And the transhumanist practice is very focused on the blue zone type of sensibility. But for transhumanists, always has been, long before the blue zone was identified, to eat well, exercise, get a good night's sleep, and have a strong community that is communicative, and there's a reciprocity there. You nurture the people you love, and you receive that nurturing back. And that makes a better life and a better, I don't want to say better, meaning one's worse than the other, but maybe a more confident person, and I don't want to even say happier life, because happiness is fleeting, but peace of mind, I suppose. We all want to be healthy, yeah.
Let's get into the AI-ness of it all. You've been a leader in this field for decades. And we can get into more detail later and go deeper later. But at a high level, how would you describe how recent developments and advancements in AI have impacted and advanced the transhumanism movement?
I would look at it the other way around. I think transhumanism has advanced AI, and someone could really argue that with me, and I could argue it back very clearly. I was there, and I remember, and I watched it, and I've seen it grow. And in fact, I was just writing about this morning. AI has been around for a while. I mean, we take a look at the Macy
Sure.
conferences and early cybernetics, back in the 1940s, 1950s, and Norbert Weiner's work, and Batesman's work, and Margaret Mead's work. And you look at all the different theoreticians, anthropologists to philosophers to psychologists to computer scientists, artists included, that were looking at artificial intelligence when it was starting to become something real. And at the University of Illinois, many years ago, many decades ago, in the I think it was 60s, there was the brain computer
Hmm.
interface, and BCI has been around for a long time, but it had a long, cold winter, because what in my assumption and what I've read and what I've studied and as far as I understand it, there was too much promise being placed on it. Oh, AI is here. We're going to have human brain and interaction and integration. And a lot was being said in the 1950s and 60s, and it just didn't
Hmm.
happen. And because of that, AI, the funding was stopped or reduced significantly. And certainly you have Marvin Minsky and John McCarthy, both at MIT, and then John McCarthy went to Stanford. But Marvin Minsky is considered, quote unquote, the father of AI, and he was a
Hmm.
transhumanist. And also, someone I would talk to about this many years ago. And maybe his theory wasn't the theory we have today or the practice we have today because AI has grown by leaps and bounds. But AI has been at the core discussion and debate of transhumanism since transhumanism started. And transhumanism started as a type of an intellectual think tank, a brain trust, but let's say think tank is more, I think, appropriate. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, when we really created an email list on the internet, it was the first email list on the internet to talk about the
Hmm.
future and AI, and that was really exciting. It was called Extropy, and had some of the, I think, some really solid thinkers, and not just people who were rewriting what someone else said or parroting what someone else says. We had the real the nascent
Hmm.
thinkers who would come up with, oh, here's this, and Ben Gertz was on it, and Peter Voss and Sean Legg and Mark Miller, and I mean so many on that list that were then Christine Peterson, Susan Schneider, who is now a very big name in AI. She was on the list early on, and we discussed these things. So AI has always been at the core. So I think that transhumanism really pushed AI out there in our conferences at Berkeley, at UCLA, at USC, at different areas around the world, and then the Transvision conferences from that. But and at Oxford University too, where Andrew Sandberg was and Nick Bostrom. So it's always been a part of transhumanism from the get
Hmm.
go. And I think that through our conferences, our magazine, the Extropy magazine, our the email list was so popular, so remarkably popular, and quoted in numerous magazines throughout the world. That was where the convergence of discussions of AI and AGI occurred. And AGI, of course, was the brainchild of Sean Legg and Ben Gertz, well, primarily Peter Voss as well. And now it's become a main on stage term, and it's something that we look at consciousness and where it's going. So I think that probably the those who convene together to discuss it and debate it, to argue about it, to question it, using the Socratic method, the really help push it out there. And what is interesting there was a lot of criticism about transhumanism in the 1990s, and even going forward about looking at AI, it's going to solve all the problems, and then became that it's going to be the AI versus the human, and then the term cyborg was more of an academic term. We didn't use it. In fact, I don't even care for the term cyborg very much, but I love, and I have to say this truly, I remember speaking to Manfred Klein about the term because he coined it with Nathan Klein in the 1950s. And maybe, no, but maybe it was the 1960s. I can't remember exactly, but I asked him, what do you think about the cyborg and transhumanism? Do you see a correlation there? He said, well, the cyborg is not as it's used today in academics and postmodernist rhetoric. Cyborg was an idea of an astronaut,
Hmm.
having the technology added to the body to survive the horrific environment of space, meaning muscle
Hmm.
loss.
So a very pragmatic, functional device for astronauts, as opposed to some
Thank you.
evil villain in a Star Trek movie. Like,
Yes, you are absolutely well. Thank you. You said it so much better than me. Thank you for that. Yes, that's exactly. And he said it had nothing to do with any of the current
right.
science fiction interpretation of cyborg, but I mean, so be it. But transhuman is different. A transhuman is altering the body to live longer. But the philosophy and the term transhumanism are slightly separate. You can be a transhumanist and want to remain human. In fact, I just have to put this in here. I gave a talk recently at a conference in Miami just a couple of weeks ago, and I did a survey first to look at some
Hmm.
data on what people wanted to be called in the future. And the options were human, transhuman, cyborg, post-human, human point two, um, yeah, any of the
Yeah.
variables that are being used today. And most people, regardless of their philosophical, religious, political, and futuristic view, chose human. And so it caused me to want to research evolutionary biology. So every morning, instead of watching the news, because it's
Uh-huh.
so awful, I can't watch it anymore, I spend that time with my two dog companions and my cup of coffee, watching and listening to different lectures and and courses on evolutionary biology and life.
So far, we've mostly been discussing these concepts at an abstract philosophical level. I'd love to get to for listeners to make us a little more concrete. What are a few specific areas that most excite you of how we can improve whether our bodies or our minds, and maybe AI is part of this conversation, but it doesn't have to be. What and since you've seen this, you've been at the forefront of this for decades. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about nanobots? Are we
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
brain computer interfaces? Are we talking? Let's get a little more specific about what are the three or four, up to you, how many categories? What are the specific kind of areas of technological progress that most excite you for helping us live longer and live better? Not just, I know it's not just about lifespan, but also a health span. It's about quality of life as well. What are the areas that most excite you?
yeah. Yeah. Before I give you my
Hmm.
pillars, I'd like to make to clarify something for your listeners, for your audience, who I know value you very much and want to get at some of maybe some things they're questioning right now. There's different schools of thought in longevity
Hmm.
right now. There's a school of thought that thinks that you have people like um, billionaires who are on the cover of magazines saying they're biohacking themselves and they have their cocktail of
Right.
vitamins or stuff they're taking or injecting in their body. That's okay for them, but it's not going to solve
Hmm.
aging. Bottom
Hmm.
line, aging is very complex, and we're all individuals, even though we share a lot of
Hmm.
DNA. uh, Everyone functions differently. We have our chemistry is different. So what may work for Brian Johnson may not work for
Right.
you. And then you have those who really think something's going to happen very fast. Ray Kurzweil, maybe so, and love Ray very much, dear friend, but it may not happen that fast. So we have to be aware that things may not occur. So with biology, we have to be very aware of science and that what we're doing to our bodies may not be the best
Hmm.
thing. So whatever vitamins you're taking, stem cells, metformin, whatever you're doing, it may not, it may not extend your life. And right now,
Hmm.
today, there is no cure for aging and there is no solution, no cocktail, nothing that we know of today that is going to prevent
Hmm.
death and extend our lives past the 122.3 years by the longest living human, Jean Calmet, a French woman who is lovely, lovely life, etc. That's a fact. No gene therapy, no stem cells, no vitamins. But what we can do today is to be as healthy as possible. And I gave you those in the very beginning. It's what you eat, your nutrition, how you exercise, aerobics, anaerobics, stretching, Pilates, yoga, etc. And not only your body, but your brain. Brain plasticity is exceedingly important, and knowing how to practice that, which I do, and I've talked about this at numerous conferences, very important. Your sleep patterns, but it's not just your sleep, it's your relaxation throughout the day, finding that meditation or reducing stress. And lastly, and importantly, communication or community. But it's not just community and communication. You got to have that reciprocity. You have to feel nurtured and give nurture. And that is so important for the whole well-being.
Quick aside, by the way, if I have to bet on any one person to beat the lovely French lady from 122.3 years, my money's on you. As an aside, if I think
I'm
I think
trying.
you I
I,
think you have a good shot at this.
Okay. All right. So that's the given. That's the given. Just so your audience knows that no matter what conference you go to and what people are saying that are getting a lot of attention and can spend a lot of money, that's okay and good for them. But it's not going to do what we need. It may eventually, but not right now. It's just being as healthy as you can today is the best thing that we can do. And we know how to do that, the four things. Okay, now AI. Okay, so where are we going? Now, this is where my passion is
Yeah.
and my excitement. Okay, so number one, we have too much data. Okay, thank goodness, or the human genome was almost, it's still a little not sequenced, but let's just say for to make it easy, let's say the human genome is fully sequenced. It's not, if you look at the science, but let's just say it's fully, we know, and we know we share a lot of genes, and we know that it's not just the genetics or the genes that are important, it's what the genes do, how they get turned on and turned off. So then it becomes the proteins, what their job is. But the messengers that deliver a message to the proteins that affect the genes, that's important. So what are those messengers? What are those systems? So we're learning about that. The more we learn, the more we realize we need to know. So we're just getting now, you can have a cancer gene, but it may not turn on if you live a healthy life, if you practice those four things. Or you could turn them on, they may happen. So mutations happen constantly, and there's senescence constantly within the body. Okay, what AI can do is sort this information for the doctor or the therapist or the theoretician, whoever the scientist who's working on it for you to help better know what is going on inside your body. Okay, so there's too much information. Your doctors can't keep up. In fact, most doctors, at least I go to, I'm asking questions that they don't know about. And it's not that they're wrong and I'm right at all. It's just that I'm focused on it and they're focused on a
Sure.
million other
Sure.
things. There's too much information for any doctor, no matter how brilliant, to be able to sort through it on a level that needs to be accomplished. And that's where AI comes in. So AI is a great data collector, a great sorter, and can help with that. Number one, that's the most
Got it.
important thing AI can do right now with our physical or bodily or cellular or molecular structure. Okay, what else? AI can go help us discover new not only connections to diseases when they can turn on and turn off as far as that messaging system and the weaknesses in our bodies and our brains, etc. So it can really help sort out that data, and that is so important. Also, and I think equally as important, it can be a good fact finder. There's so much misinformation about longevity today in the sciences and technologies. People are, let's just say, academics or scholars are writing papers that get published, and then we find out later that the research was not concluded through the methodology, the protocol that was established within the paper. And we're finding that more and more that sometimes it's overly hypothetical, based on conjecture rather than being based on actual factual findings, assays, and results. That's really important. Also, what's going on today that concerns me is it's become hip or become in vogue to be in the longevity field. It's not just a movement anymore, as it was in the 80s and 90s, where we were talking about living longer. Derek Pearson, Sandy Shaw, Roy Walford, Cynthia Kenyon, Judith Campisci. I mean, there's so many of us that were really focused on this. But today it's become hip to pitch an idea at a conference, and that's great. And there's so many investors
Yeah.
looking for where to invest their money to make a profit, and that's great. But it may not be based on the most reliable information or protocols. So AI could really help by sorting through the theoretical concepts and testing it, you know, based on scenarios, like futurists do. The other thing there too is citations. I have noticed that I know with my students, and especially in grad school, students working on their master's degrees and even PhDs, I'll look at their citations, not with a fine-tooth comb, but just I'll skim through them, and I'm going, "Without what? That's not a primary source." They're using other people's, and then it gets and you take it and it gets watered down, so the person writing the thesis is based on conjecture of something that was said by someone who wasn't really a primary source. And so I think AI could really help in looking at where the primary sources is and making sure that that information that was original is taken, and that original idea or work was built off on, and in what ways, and then we can get better science. Okay, so AI, I think those are the needed, so needed. Now the great fun stuff is merging with the human.
We had our vegetables, we had our broccoli and carrots. Now let's get to the chocolate
Oh,
of
okay.
yeah.
Let's get please, milk chocolate. A little dark in there, but I like the milk chocolate. Okay. So there is a person by the name of Robert Friedis who has written the seminal encyclopedic reference for nanorobotics or nanorobots in the body to repair the breakdown and the damage done on a cellular level. And I have two of his books right here. He gave me his first book on my 50th birthday as a birthday gift, and his second book is out now. It's called Cryostasis Revival, and he's taken it a step further, where he's really looked at the most important areas of nanorobotics, which you have to have AI to have
Mhm.
robots, because
Yep.
that's the information. So the fine tuning of AI delivery systems and delivering information and assigning tasks to the robot to perform based on personalized medicine, of course. However, he's now looking more ardently at biocompatibility. And that is so important because, as we've learned from the cochlear implant to different brain chips to organ transplant, etc., that if there's a not a biocompatibility, the body will reject it and fight against it. Sepsis could incur, any type of bacteria could incur.
What would that mean, just before we get too deep in the weeds there? What are some
Mhm.
examples of conditions or health problems that these little miniature nano robots
Sure.
could help solve or prevent, which I'm guessing ultimately the end game is to dramatically boost human longevity and help us live longer?
Right.
Give us an example or two of what
Right.
these robots could do.
Okay, an example today, they're not being used today. While different hospitals and doctors say they're doing nanomedicine, they're just doing molecular
Yeah.
medicine. Nanomedicine would be nanorobots going into the body through a vaccine, through a nose spray, an eye drop, maybe a pill. It could be injected in numerous ways into the body. And remember, nanorobots, you can't see them. They're molecular. They're tiny,
Hmm.
tiny,
Hmm.
tiny, thinner than a piece of hair. So they're programmed to do a task. So the task that they could do today, for example, let's see. Okay, I'll just take my own
Hmm.
body as an example. I had bladder cancer in 2020. So I'm a stage 2 cancer, and I had the cancer cut out. My bladder works fine. I'm okay. I've been in remission for years, so I'm cancer free. Yay. But what could have been done, the nano robots could have gone in and gotten rid of those cancer cells and repair the remedial tissue around, so there'd be no scarring.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have heart disease, something I don't have, but I do have floppy left ventricle. Say you have any arrhythmia or heart blockers, the nano robots can go into the the arteries and clean out the plaque that is slowing down or causing the heart to struggle more. It can go in and clean up and clean out. Let's take something else: diabetes, insulin. It could go in and regulate the insulin within the body. And diabetes, as we know, is on the rise. So we need nanorobotics for that to regulate. Mind you, it's not just about repairing and building stuff on a cellular level, going inside the cell, cleaning it up and repairing. It could also go in and regulate and homeostasis. It would balance out the highs and the lows of the insulin issues with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Another one is, well, heart disease we know is a very
Yes.
serious condition, and nanorobots certainly could go in and help the heart um, calm down,
Hmm.
so it doesn't have to
Hmm.
work so hard to push the blood and the blood going through the body. Looking for blood clots, for example, aneurysms. It could go hunt for things in the body that we're totally unaware of before they become life threatening. So they could not only go in and do work to repair, they could also be regulators to help our
Well, I
homeostasis.
have so many more questions on this. I could do a full 2-hour episodes just on nanorobots, clearly. But I'd love to, as we're winding down on time, I'd love to get kind of to bring us full circle. Um, what's your best? Where's your head at now, as far as how how far can we boost human longevity? How both in the let's say short, medium, long term, do you think the age of uh, average age of death or lifespan can bump up to over 100, 120, 150, 200? And then my wild question for you is, having someone as a futurist who studies this deeply and knows that frontier science, do you think we'll ever get to be in a place where we can quote cheat or beat death? And if so, how are you grappling with that? How does that reframe how you think about life? I know it's a lot to ask you with a few minutes left, but let's start with the simple stuff. What's your best guess for how much we'll be able to boost the kind of lifespan?
I think we'll be able to boost the lifespan well past 100 years old in good health. We're already seeing there's so many more people living to 100 and
Hmm.
beyond, and seeing that every day 10,000 people in the United States turn 65. We've got an increase in that particular sector of the population that wants to be
Hmm.
healthy. So it is a drain on our on us if we don't find ways to be
Yes.
healthier. It's going to totally be an economic disaster. So we need to be healthier. Uh, but I think if we're healthier, we can certainly live well past 123.5 years, like Jean Calmet, um, but not without the aid of advances in nanorobotics, genetic engineering, um, prosthetics,
Hmm.
cognitive repair. And one area that I think nanorobotics can really help is going in and helping with the synapses and the relationship between the neuron connections and wake up the parts of the brain that have lost memory or find the memory that's lost in the brain. So that's a whole big
Hmm.
area because dementia
That's
is on the
that's
rise too.
incredibly it's incredibly exciting. That is incredibly exciting.
Yes,
Yes.
that to me is the most exciting
Mhm.
thing. Okay, so now looking as a future, because that's exciting. Looking at where it can go, we're not going to. I don't think the human body, unless it's constantly repaired and regenerated, can live 300 years. It's oxidation
Mm.
happens. The body breaks down, and we can keep on repairing and restoring our biocells so often, but eventually we're going to have to replace them. So, in my view, now this is strictly my view, could be shared by others, but we're going to have to be replacing our biological structure with synthetic
Mhm.
structure. We've already grown synthetic skin for burn victims and individuals who have had trauma with their skin. We know that can happen, and as skin transplants have been helped so many people, we've regrown certain body parts to help people who've lost them. So we're looking at biocompatibility between
Mhm.
synthetic. But if we get to a point where we want to live a couple of hundred
Mhm.
years, how much can we regenerate these biocells without replacing them with new biocells? Or maybe people will opt not to have biocells but
Mhm.
synthetic, or let's call
Mhm.
artificial systems. And I think that's perfectly fine too. We have the Olympics, where we have the Paralympics, with people competing with prosthetic
Mhm.
parts. So if we look at that as a mainstream given worldwide and then go, okay, so people who say they don't want to have a prosthetic merge with AI. Well, wait a minute. We already have people competing
Right.
at the renowned Olympics that have AI systems because they're prosthetic parts. also largely have haptic systems. And a haptic system is connecting the nerves to the brain so that the person can feel the heat of coffee or the coolness of an iced
Mm-hmm.
tea. So we already have that at very beginning stages. We're looking at, I have 2 artificial lenses on my
Mm-hmm.
eyes. I was going blind with cataracts.
I've had the
So
same
I can
surgery. I had cataract surgery. Does that mean I'm a cyborg? There's a,
No, yes, no, you're not a cyborg. You're a human. I like the term
yeah.
human too. And from what I'm studying about evolutionary biology, to change and be another species requires certain specific changes or alterations in how we reproduce or who we mate with, and isolation of a species can cause a new subspecies, etc. And even our ancestors as hominids, we had intersex with
Hmm.
Neanderthals, and there were different types of humans at that time. So there could be different types of humans in the future. So I think that, yeah, we're all cyborgs if you want to use
Mm-hmm.
enhancement. According to Manfred Klein, I don't think we're cyborgs politically, like some might profess in academics. I think it's more of a
Yep.
political statement than an actual physiological statement. But I think that it's okay to merge with synthetics and artificial systems, eyeglasses, your buds, your earbuds that I can see right
Mm-hmm.
now. And many of us have fillings in our teeth, or
Right. We're already there as far as using
we're already
technology
there.
to improve our bodies, whether it's contact lenses or prosthetic arm or a
Yes.
cast when we're in many ways, or even crutches. These are
Where it gets
yeah,
concerning, and I think that where you were headed with this is when we look at existential
yeah,
risk and the fear that people have about what is the future
yeah.
if people live well into their hundreds. What are we going to become? What does it mean? And the fear used to be overpopulation. Well, that is no longer a fear because we
Hmm.
know as a fact that there is a population
Hmm.
decline. And in some countries, there's really a problem, like in Japan,
Hmm.
with a extreme reduction in birth rate. So we're having to face that now. And so the different fears that excite people to, run run around going, oh, the world is ending, or the apocalyptic thing, we do resolve that. We just need to be a little bit safer with AI. And we've experienced Chat GPT 4.5, and many of us have had some interface with virtual reality and different environments. So we can see how it could get obfuscated, and we could maybe go into a type of uncanny
Hmm.
valley, which is a very serious thing psychologically for our species. But I think that if we manage it with good judgment, with some wisdom, and just be kinder people, we'll be able to find resolve. And I think people need to learn critical thinking and also be visionary at the same time. And that's where I think transhumanism holds its greatest value today. It's not a hyped religion, it's not a hyped science fiction thing at all. It's about critical thinking and looking at the advances in science and technology and what it means to us, and how we can remain human but live longer and healthier and hopefully kinder, more conscientious beings.
What a lovely note to end on, Natasha. Thank you so much. I very much
Oh,
enjoyed
thank you.
this, and as I said, I'm betting on you, 200 plus. That's my guess for you. But, thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Thank you again to Dr. Natasha Vita-More. You can find links to her and her works in the show notes. And thank you to you, dear listener. I hope that you live to be 287 years old. And the best way to further your lifespan is to subscribe to AI Curious on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or Spotify or whatever fine establishment and platform you get your podcasts from. Please rate it 5 stars, forward it to a friend, forward to someone else you hope lives forever. Thanks again, and see you next time.